Hello, this is Dr. Wagner again for CIS 131. Today's unit is going to go over repetition. And so I wanted to cover, basically there's four different types of repetition structures in Java. And they should be familiar from whatever language you've come from. If you learned C Sharp or Java before this class, these are obviously pretty intuitive. But if you had Python before, there's some new ones in here you may not have seen before. So, like described in the CIS 131 or 129 class, there's basically three types of repetition structures. There's the pre-condition, post-condition, and iterative. Now for the precondition, this is also called a while loop. And so the condition is actually pretty simple. You type in while, parentheses, and then within the parentheses you put some sort of condition that's either true or false. So as long as the while statement is true, you can go through this. And so generally for while statements, you don't really count. That's what for loops are for, iterative loops. So usually you have something that the condition changes. So I'm going to make a real basic structure. I'm going to call this int brackets, which means it's going to be an array. And I'm going to call this just array1 and equals. And then in Java you can create arrays in the lines by basically if you put a brace and then a set of values. So I'm going to make an array with the numbers 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And then I'm going to make a while loop. So I'm going to first make a counter. So I'll make a counter. So I'll do counter equals 0. And then I'm going to put in here while array1 counter does not equal 40. And so what this loop is going to do is print out a values until it looks 40. So usually while loops look for a specific condition either in your loop or you have some sort of Boolean condition within the values. So I'll do system print line, your number is array1 counter. And then a lot of times with loops you want to actually kind of check what the values are. So in Eclipse you can make a debugger. So if you click on, I'll make a little bit more space here. If you click on this right margin here, double click on it, you'll see a little dot point up. That's called a breakpoint. And so when you run the debugger for this particular value, it will stop here. So what I want to do is run repetition debug. And so click to debug. So like I mentioned in the last video, in Eclipse, the basically VCR start play button is to run. If you look at the debug, sorry, my phone rang. If you look at the debug, if you click this little bug, it will run the debugger. And so when I click this, it'll say, okay, select the source, and you can say yes. So you want to make sure to save it. And it's going to run it, and it'll bring you to this debug screen. So you see, you get a little arrow here on the left, and it basically tells you to stop. And so if you hit F6, or you right-click, or you click up here on the top, and you hit step over, it's going to step over the item. And you can look at what the values of the variables are. And then also you can, if you click breakpoints, you can see where the breakpoints are. And if you look at the expressions, you can see what the different expressions are. So I'm going to get rid of the expressions from when I was running some code earlier. So I'm going to hit F6 again. And under the variables, you notice I have argv, which is the passed-in value from the command line, if I have one, array1, and you can look at the values in array1, and you have the counter. And then I have another tab again, and so you notice how array1 counter. So if I wanted to see what this value is, I could copy it, go to expressions, paste it in here, hit enter, and it'll show you what the value is. So I'm looking at the variables right now. So it's going to print out in my console your number is 10. It's going to go here again. It's going to print out 10. It prints out 10 again. So I made a mistake and I need to actually iterate on the counter. So I'm going to run this again. So I'm going to type in counter plus plus. So plus plus iterates, adds 1 basically to a value. It's used a lot for countering, a lot for counting. And then when I hit save, the debugger is going to actually stop and restart the program. So I'm going to run in this program. So you notice here I have numbers 10, 20, 30, and then it stops. And so a while loop basically looks for, it's a preconditioned one that looks for a precondition. The next type of loop is called a do while loop or a post condition loop. So I have the condition, and then at the end of the do while loop you put while, you have do in the front and you have while at the end. So I'm going to say while input, or while array1 counter is less than, I'll say, 45. And then you have to make sure you have a semicolon at the end. And then, so I'm going to reset counter. And what a while loop does is it doesn't check the conditions when you first go in there. And so, to be honest, most people don't use do loops that often. A lot of times you see do loops a lot with kind of younger programmers, so it's kind of seen as kind of like a faux pas, almost like something that noobs do. But one thing I really like using do loops for is making text menus and stuff. So you can basically put all the items in there, and then you keep on reading in the values until you enter like some sort of exit strategy. So say for example, actually I'll make a real quick menu. So I need to make a menu, I'll need to also print out values and output values. So I'm going to import Java util dot scanner, and then I make a quick scanner. New scanner system dot in. And then I'll make a quick menu, so I'll do system dot out, print line, enter a number between 0 and 4 inclusive. So this way I can type in numbers between 0 and 4. And then I'll have the scanner, so I'll do sc get or next line, and this value I'll put in there. I'll make a value called string or int. Entered line. And actually this should be next int. And then, so what I want for my input value is if entered line, I'll change this entered value actually this won't work. If entered value this isn't a great one, but I'll say entered value, and I'll have to work around this, is greater than or equal to 0 and. So conditions in this and is the same as and for Python, and this, if you know JavaScript, is the same. And then I do entered val is less than or equal to 4. Keep on going. And this value needs to be on the outside. So enter val equals 0. And then for the value, I'll just initially print out the first value. So I'll do system dot out to print line. Say the initial value for array 1 equals, and then whatever the value is. So I'll do array 1 enter val. I think this should work. So I'm going to move my breakpoint from here to here. And then I have a warning saying I need to close this, so after this I'll do .close. Get rid of all the warnings. You don't want to have warnings in your code. Hit save, and then I'll run the debugger again. Go through, and so it's going to print the initial values, 10. It says enter your value, inclusive. And so what I'm going to type in, I'll type in 3. And then I'll step through this, and you can see that it's going to print the value of 3 is 40. And I'll try this again, and then I'll do -1. And then you'll see it exits, and then it goes out. And so this is a iterative loop, a post-condition, precondition. The last one's an iterative loop, or also called the for loop. So in Java, there's actually 2 types of for loops. There's a regular for loop, which you've maybe seen before, and there's also for the C# programmers. And if you guys have ever programmed in other languages, also something that's equivalent to a for each state loop. And so I'll show you what each one is. So usually for loops are if you want to count in a specific order through something. So so there's basically 3 parts of a for loop. There's initialization. So I'm going to say I have this counter int ii equals 0, and then the conditions. So I'm going to do ii while the conditions are going. So it's ii while less is equal to, and then in Java, if you do array 1 and then you do a dot, you can actually get the length of an array. So I got the array, and then just my iteration. So I'm going to do ii plus plus. And then like before, I'm just going to print out the values. So your number is such and such. Now I'm going to comment out this so I don't have to type it in. So in Eclipse, if you want to comment something out, highlight it, and then if you hit Control Shift C, it'll comment all the parts that you highlighted. So I'm going to run this code again. See, I put a breakpoint next on line 38, and then it's going to step through the code. And it ran through. And you notice I actually made an error here. This should not be counter, it should be ii. But you kind of get the idea. And then also there's another type of for loop. So there's a for each type of loop. So if you do for, and then you can put the value, so int. And so this value here, int, I'll show you in a bigger screen, should be the same as this. If you do int, and then you say, call this num, and then you put a colon after this, and then whatever your array or iterative type is, if I type array 1, what this will do is loop through the whole array. So I'll take this thing again and replace this with val. This will loop through the whole array and then put each number from the array into this value. So put another breakpoint here, run through this, and then debug it. And sorry about the dogs. And you can see that it ran through and completed. So this is my basic lecture for repetition. If you have any questions, you can either put in the discussion page for the D2L or leave it in the comments on this YouTube page. Hope you have a great evening.